Through the Noise with your host, Ernesto Glucksmann.
Thank you, May, for joining me on the show. Finally, we were able to make this happen. We've had some technical difficulties, whatever. You're across the pond. It just happens. I don't even know how they get the internet across the pond. Apparently, it's under the water or satellite. Who knows? But we're here. May Al-Karooni, you're the founder, the CEO, and the visionary of Globechain. I'm going to do my best to describe this, but basically, you're kind of a member operated organizing company for reusing materials and trying to divert materials away from landfills. I'm sure you have a better way of explaining that. But we came across your business and I was like, holy shit, you guys are doing it because you've been doing it over in Europe, but there's more regulations. You're basically, to me, the canary in the mine, right? Like it's happening. Yeah. If things are improving for you, then that's what's going to happen here in the US sooner than ever. The IPCC report came out. Surprise, it's going faster. It's worse than expected. So, you don't have to do much, I think. I mean, you have to do a lot, but the pressure's coming where people are going to be like, okay, we need to do something. So if you and I were sitting at dinner and I had no idea what you did, what would you tell me when I asked you the proverbial, May, what do you do? What do you do?
Yeah, I've had that many times and I can never get it very short, but basically I say we're an ESG reuse marketplace. So imagine it's eBay, but we don't sell the items. We give them away for free from businesses and we generate ESG data on the impact. So it's a B2B reuse marketplace.
That's the gold, actually. It's that ESG. I mean, because there's our marketplaces. I think there's a set where you can for your neighbors. Hey, I got this stroller. I don't want to use it. I don't want to throw it away. I want to give it away to somebody. It's like a free trade. But this is B2B. This is serious business. This is tackling on getting that report back that said, yes, we transferred X pounds of whatever to a nonprofit or another organization, so it didn't go into a landfill. Can you contextualize that process, at least from where you started in the EU and I guess Spain? You're also in Spain, a few other places, right? What's that like absolutely. Now?
Yeah, so I set up Globechain because I used to work for an investment bank. This was many, many years ago. And we moved offices across the road and they disposed of all their office furniture and we kept the buildings. So I was like, they came around and said, pick your own chair, table, carpet, color, tile. And I was like, what are you doing with the stuff? And they just disposed of it, and those were the days when sustainability, circular economy, which I can explain a bit later, didn't really exist. Like being green was just like recycling your plastic bottle, water bottle, that kind of thing in your home. And I just thought, why has no one digitalized waste and connected these enterprises to nonprofits and small businesses and people to reuse and redistribute unneeded items? So ultimately for the enterprise, our kind of mission, if you like, is to help them reduce waste to landfill and obviously improve carbon. The speed of collections is really important for us as a marketplace. So most things within the UK and Europe, it's 20 minutes for requests. We say normally 24 hours for a request in the US. And then obviously, as you said, the USP of the whole system was this ESG data that I developed over time. And we break down everything. So we know who took it, what they did with it, if it helped with employment, upskilling, if they reused it, resold it, upcycled, recycled. And we generate a report, and that ESG data is used really on 3 levels: sustainability waste reporting, tax offsetting, and on C level, obviously credit financing, IPO, bond risk, share pricing. You're seeing it now, right? The last 2 years, everybody's talking about ESG and everybody knows what ESG is. Whereas when we started 6 years ago, I was having problems speaking to government going, it's reuse, not recycling. And nobody understood that. never mind ESG. And the reason I started the ESG part, the irony is in the bank that I worked for, I used to raise money for VCTs, the old venture capital structure, venture capital trusts, they were called in those days.
Okay.
And I thought, great, I'm going to be like a naive entrepreneur and go out and go, I can get some funding for this. Easy, I raised for funds. No, first question was, what's your market cap? And I was like, good question. Yeah. There isn't one. There was no market cap. I could only find one statistic from a waste management firm globally that was on recycling. And even that was quite biased, right? Because it's just one company. So I thought, gosh, this is going to be hard because there's no benchmark and this is an industry that doesn't exist. But my gut instinct was, well, it's going to exist because I'm hearing a lot of noise on the ground from the enterprises needing this solution. So I just thought to the VCs, stuff you, I'm going to show you and I'm going to bring in some clients and generate revenue. So obviously not an easy journey, but bootstrapped for 4 years. Year 3, we generated revenue. And I mean me, myself, and I, and an outsourced agency web development. And it cost me probably $900 to set up the first site. And actually, the irony is the first company I reached out to that responded and was interested was a company called Arcadia Group. Now it's quite famous in the UK because unfortunately it's just gone into insolvency and a big company's bought them. But they were the darlings of the UK retail market. They had over 2,000 stores. In the US, you might know them as Topshop. So they owned a lot of brands and a lot of controversy around it, now. But in the past, they were the fashionable store to go to. And I said to them, have you got any furniture that you dispose of that we can redistribute? And they were like, we don't have furniture. We have a big problem, fixtures and fittings. So what you don't know, and it's not just them, is the retail market spends a lot of money on bespoke fixtures and fittings. And they don't have storage, right? Because the storage they have on the high streets is really for stock. So they dispose of it and they spend millions of pounds a year incinerating and disposing of fixtures, fittings, and so on. So that then expanded Globechain really into 3 sectors: retail, construction, and hospitality. So in the end, we do 3 verticals. We do retail shops, all these rolling refurbs. And actually, we're starting to do e-commerce product returns as well for e-commerce, because over 60% of returns from e-commerce companies are incinerated. And obviously with COVID and everything being online now with supply chains, I'm sure that figure has gone up to
exploded. 60%.
Yeah.
60%.
That was before COVID. Yeah. Because basically what's happening is you're buying a product online. It's super cheap with shipping. You get it. And a lot of people buy 2 or 3 the same product and colors, or different styles. And then they return it in good faith, thinking it's just a bit of packaging and somebody's going to resell it. Most of the time it doesn't. It sits in a warehouse until it's forgotten about, and then they can't sell it for whatever reason. And then they have to incinerate it because they need the space in the warehouse for new stock.
So crazy.
It's a lot of the fast fashion and, a lot of different, obviously they sell the clothing and the textiles, but there's a lot that doesn't get sold, as well on that side. So we do that. Construction, everything from demolition and refurbishments. In fact, we're seeing a lot of our business now is about 70% built environment. So fire doors, ceiling tiles, flooring, lighting, carpets. We've done an air bridge for an airport. We've done a fuel cell for Transport for London. It's some crazy things and some really simple things like a table and a chair. And hotels and restaurants are very similar. They do rolling refurbs all the time.
Yeah, for that, because you're competing on the experience, right? And you want something new for a new restaurant or a retail chain buys out. I remember I was just in Minnesota. There's a coffee shop, Caribou Coffee. I love that Caribou Coffee experience. And I remember in Washington, D.C., we had a bunch of them, but the company Pete's Coffee bought them. And they just said, other than Minnesota, everybody else is just going to go to Pete's. And so they just took all that stuff and chucked it and then just refurbished. And it was
it's normal.
I know.
Yeah, I know.
It's like, what are you talking about? You bought the coffee shop line. Why do you have to rebrand the whole, I don't know, something there just didn't seem to add up for me, but I'm a fan of the other brand, they just didn't pick the one I liked. But you do, once you start digging underneath all this, it's like you realize, man, so much material. It's just like straight up just chucked into landfills or burnt, incinerated.
And you wouldn't believe, you think these big organizations have complex asset inventory systems that can, optimize it up to a point, supply chain logistics at the beginning, for sure, it's highly complex. But actually, when it's within the organization, this coffee shop wouldn't have known what assets they had everywhere, right? So, there's a communication problem there. There's spreadsheet problems. Everything is on Excel, and you don't know if it's accurate. And actually, that's in COVID, we realized there was a need for an internal reuse and loaning system as well. And a lot of our clients were saying, listen, we're doing these restaurant refurbs or whatever. Can we see if we can optimize and reuse and loan our assets first between stores that are closing, stores that are still operating, and we can, rather than them buying new products. So we offer that as well as the external marketplace now as well. But yeah, it's been a very interesting journey, and we've actually even done medical equipment. So we work with our healthcare system here, the NHS, for medical equipment. So not only because of refurbs, but policy and compliance and audits force companies to change their equipment quite regularly, especially within healthcare, right, from contamination. So it's not contaminated, but somebody somewhere years ago has gone, those curtains need to be in that hospital for 6 months, and then anything beyond that is higher risk of being contaminated. So we need to remove it and replace them. So we redistribute patient beds, X-ray machines, crutches, due to compliance. And we have charities in predominantly Western Africa and Eastern Europe, such as Poland, Ukraine, Libya, and it goes to rebuild hospitals. So, so it's localized supply, if you like, to help and impact kind of communities, and obviously more international supply chain as well.
So, I mean, I can imagine, these folks that work in these, especially in the retail and I guess the hospitals there. It's like, it's all the attention's always like, how do we get the material, the products delivered to the customer so we can collect the cash? That's been historically the only thing you need to think about. And then whatever the customer does with it, or your returns come back, you just kind of factor that in as the price of doing business, and you just got to move on because there's so much more stuff. But now that regulations are catching up, now that you have obviously climate change, ESG data that's being sort of figured out. But I would say also, reputational risk. Like if you're just seen as a company that's creating widgets, trying to sell them, and then you take, half of those get sent back to you because, well, let's say your product's not that great and you're just chucking it in. I just wonder if that's a matter of time before that gets caught into the news cycle, that here you are just throwing away stuff that you could just give it to, you just got to find the people that can't afford it, would love to have it, would make an impact on their nonprofit or business or whatever. And there's nothing quite there. But these tax incentives, these new regulations, the ESG, if you take that all into consideration, now you have like compelling reasons, right? Aside from the climate change, let's just say you don't care, but you're looking at your business reputation, you're looking at what's becoming expected, and that starts to hit the wallet, right? And you're leaking there as the larger the company, Amazon, I'm going to name them Amazon, you're leaking, value that you could be repurposing if you just like applied some attention or work with a group like you guys, right? And the key here is to get that report back, to automate the process. If I give this table to somebody, I get this receipt that I gave this table of a certain way, whatever car. I mean, what's that look like? What's some of that stuff now like for you guys when you give that?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, it's all automated, and obviously there's some machine learning in it. So in the past, it was quite manual, right? We'd talk to the nonprofits, we'd talk to the corporates, and we'd start building up like through feedback forms and asking them what you did with the product. But over 6 years, we've got quite kind of intelligent data now to know kilos and tonnages of items. We're looking, we can integrate now with APIs so that we can streamline and plug into client and enterprise software systems, right? So we can start getting very accurate data on measurements, quantities, and, it's moving into something called material passports, specifically in construction, where, the idea behind it in kind of a utopia world, and, it will get there. It will probably take a few years. We've got two business models working at the moment, right? We've got our existing linear businesses, as you said, that actually is very hard for companies to just switch over, right? Because it's about we're making our margins on consumerism, and the way we produce goods, we design products, we design buildings, years ago has never changed. That procurement has never changed. And what you've got now is a new industry that's emerging. And as you said, there's really, last year I saw it big time shift. Three main drivers, exactly what you said, kind of government policy drivers, legislation drivers, consumer drivers, the new generation, millennials, Gen Z, the next generation coming, they actually don't care about material goods so much. There was a report out in Europe about how the generation actually wants to spend money on experiences. So they're very aware of like their ethics, their integrity, being green, sustainable, and they're not afraid to call people out. It's a very different way of being brought up. I got brought up in the recycling era, recycle your bottles at home. But, this is another level. So, and they've got the spending power. So, what do these luxury retailers say to these kids with basically the better salaries? They're smarter, they know what they want. They're not going to be buying, luxury, but they might do if that retailer changes. And that's where the ESG comes in, right? Because your analysts are going to be looking at that and doing your bond risk, your financing on the back of that, the valuations. So all those three things with data are driving this new industry. And I'd say it's definitely fast forwarded the last 2 years, which, as you said, helps us because it's no longer a sale of like, this is innovation, a behavior change, get your head around the commercials. It's a case of do or die. It's a Kodak moment, right? Like who's going to take note and take a risk on new innovation and change, because you're going to have to. But you have to do it in stages. A large company can't change overnight. And, you mentioned Amazon, but, actually, technically, legally, they're not doing anything wrong. It's a policy issue. Not in some states, maybe not. But, in France, they've changed their framework to companies aren't allowed to dispose of things. They have to reuse them, donate them, do something else with it. In the UK, it's slightly a bit different. You have to resell it, lease it, or export it to get your zero rate VAT. Right? And it's like, why?
Get it off the island.
Know, crazy, right? The irony. Yeah. So they're the issues that the Amazons and the e-commerce companies have, because there's no simple, I'm going to donate it to a charity and I can zero rate the VAT. And in construction, it's the same in the UK. So if those policies were looked at and changed by government or local governments, that would make a massive shift and allow a bigger pool of resource, and companies like us. I mean, we can get around that issue of policy because of what we do, right? But there's a lot of organizations that, are quite scared of going down that route.
Just because of the complexity of the local regulations, the regional, the country, they're becoming disparate. Each country's trying to solve this in a particular way that kind of, I guess, makes sense for them. But in that chaos, it's very hard for the larger publicly traded business companies to probably adjust to everything. But I'll push back on that, because I think it doesn't matter when you are seeing, at least in the US, you're seeing more shareholders requesting for risk assessments to climate change. It's all tied together. So you're going to get pulled into a public discussion one way or the other about what is it that you're doing to reduce the carbon footprint. And so there's lots of ways to do that, right? You could, solar panels, call Elon to help you. I don't know. But there's a variety on the production of the manufacturing. But then there's also this, like the disposal of extra materials or inventory that get turned over. There's just a potential there that's existing. And somewhere I had read, at least for you, because you're early stage. I mean, you've been doing this for 6 years, so you're not early stage. Yeah. You're in the trough of like, okay, I know what I'm doing now, right? And I was grueling and it was brutal. And these VCs that are out there didn't want to get involved with you early.
Yeah.
I mean, let's just say if there's somebody out there listening as a potential investor, you're looking at a market cap, somewhere I read 5 trillion by 2025, the global reuse market cap, right?
Yeah, it's the circular economy market cap. So we sit in circular economy. Circular economy is more complex because the idea is to become circular. So you make, produce or manufacture, and then the waste there is no waste ultimately, right? It comes back into your system in some shape or form. So kind of modular buildings is a perfect example. The idea behind it is every new housing in the future is modular, made out of sustainable materials that decomposes or whatever it may be, that's standardized and certified. And the idea is that once you're done with that building, you can break it up like a Lego and build something else
and repurpose the ones that you
so that is probably a complete circular model, but there's very few hardly any old companies that have been around for a long time have got there yet or are nowhere near. There are some new startups that could help, and as you said, it's about them using us in a good way, in partnership and collaboration to get there. I think there is a lot of ego in the market from big corporates that they want to do everything. In the past, we had corporates think that it's really simple to do a real use marketplace. I'm like, go ahead, be my guest, because this is a completely new business model that is very complex on the back end. So if you think you can do that on the side of selling your furniture or whatever else you're doing, you find that they fail no matter how much money they put on it.
Yeah, I'm sure like some of the companies are like, we'll just put a few of our, 20,
we'll just
30-year-olds
together.
Do our a new Salesforce form, and we'll be fine. We'll be able to find people that will want our whatever.
Yeah, we'll just call them up and then we'll just post it on a really scrappy listing. And we've got a network of nonprofits.
Put it in our newsletter. Somebody will want it, right? Well, when they realize, wait a minute, there's an actual network effect here as well, then go back to May, because you've been doing this for 6 years. You have 10,000 some members. There's people activated in your system that have gotten used to you. So why don't they just partner with you? Like, let's stop reinventing wheels. Let's look at who's got not just, they may see you as a small business and they're like, well, we're the big guys. Stop with all that. It's like there are people already working within this little ecosystem you've put together on your own. And, for potential investors out there, if you want to buy market share into this world, even though you're calling it a subset of the circular economy, I don't see, giant manufacturers rebuilding their factories to reincorporate materials into that's still like decades out for some of these groups. And yet they're generating all this stuff that doesn't necessarily always get sold, or they're repurposing retail outlets or whatever it is. Where can we move this stuff to? And, there's not that many that will actually give you the reports, the ESG, the data associated with that. Don't
forget, we do it. One of my pain points and frustrations in the VC world is, they're looking at ESG, they're looking at the investors, and this is, not every investor, but, the investors that are like, okay, we're doing sustainable or social impact. And they're going for a lot of funding and big money with zero revenue in data-driven companies. And that's great for some things, right? But someone's actually got to physically do the dirty work and the physical moving of assets or building of something, or whatever. So why aren't you investing in those companies as well? Because if you're invested in hundreds of data companies that all optimize data, well, there's an endpoint there. So what are you going to do? Data can't move an asset from a skip or an incineration plant to somebody's home, like on its own. Like, you have to do it. And that's where we come in. We actually physically do it and provide the data. And there's not many marketplaces that provide data for their enterprises, because we can calculate carbon from that. And as you said, like, we're at the, it's like a tree with branches, right? So we're at the bottom at the moment, the trunk, if you like, on reuse. But going forwards, because we know how the market's going, there's many different avenues we can go down. I'm not saying this is what we do, but there's waste to energy, there's carbon offsetting, there's there's so many ways. And with that data, we can predict which is going to be the next level enterprise goes to in that, so there's many ways we can be creative, and we're digital. The beauty of tech and marketplaces, we can do things remotely and scale quite quickly. But I think there is a bit of education in the market. In the past, it was very tough to persuade a VC. There was a 4.3 trillion pound market, for say economy. Now they're all on it. Now they're all trying to work out how we're doing ESG, and it's like, It's like you've got to sift through the VCs that they have to understand the vision, and they can't be that risk averse. I think the US VCs are on it more, I think, than the UK ones, because UK are very risk averse. Money breeds money, right? You're making money, we'll give you money here. It's not a case of, I see this as a massive market, and I'm going to take a pun because my return's going to be, if we
10x,
guide
5x.
it correctly.
Right.
Completely right. But it's like, you can't expect a new industry with no benchmark to work the same way as a SaaS platform, as in a CRM system or a dating site that's in a different color, right? Because I don't know where it's going, but that is the risk and the thrill and the challenge and probably the reward of being first. It's like your Airbnb and Uber. Like, how do they do it? They have no benchmark. They had a market cap, but it was different, right? The issue was, is a stranger going to get in your car and you're going to trust someone? That's sharing economy. But circular economy, I see it's that type of market, right? It's going to evolve, and there'll be players in it like us that hopefully will be the leaders in what we do, and we'll be able to guide the market in the right way. But it might be a bit too late for some VCs to get in.
Well, I think when you talk to institutional VCs, they're always too late to get. I just don't, what I mean? It's part of their model not to be in the beginning stages, or they talk about.
The name is risk, right? They are risk averse.
Totally. It's like, I don't have a lot of faith in the VC world. I'm with you, May. If you can bootstrap something on your own and be in a position yourself to be, when the wave comes of change, which is exactly where you are, you're gonna profit. There's gonna be the hard part for you will be probably to determine which opportunities make the most sense to position yourselves. Because I could see, like, the data that you've been collecting over the last few years. Let me back up. One of the challenges with ESG data is how accurate is this data? Yeah. And they're just still trying to come up with, like, the material, you called it the material passport, or whatever the specifics of each piece of thing that's created. Like, well, how much carbon was used? How much water was used? How much whatever was put into this, so that we can calculate not just the cost, the dollar cost, but the actual environmental cost. That's still so raw right now. It's still very difficult. And so you're building IP just by being here in where your business is in. You'll have some better sense of what's happening. So I wonder, at some point, maybe 5-10 years, I don't know, or maybe sooner. I think sooner, there might be some mass consolidation. There might be, I don't know, Palantir coming to you guys going, can we use some of these models in our system? Because we have.
Exactly, right. That's kind of, we're probably heading that way, because ESG data, as you said, it's not standardized. It's never really been looked at seriously. Although I know, we work with a lot of banks, and I know they've shifted up their criteria when financing on bond risk, ESG being the second metric after profitability they're looking at, right? So it's becoming more important. I think L'Oreal, Estee Lauder, Chanel, I know, Tesco's, I think H&M, they've all started to issue ESG bonds, bond tracked, KPI'd on ESG data. For sure, it's tough, right? And with carbon, you've got different types of carbon calculation: carbon embedded, demolition carbon, reefer carbon. Like, which one do you use? So it's all up in the air. As you said, what we can do. We generate revenue. We're a SaaS-enabled marketplace, so we generate revenue at the moment on annual and project ad hoc fees for the enterprise to list the items, right? Because it's kind of a known-ish model. We worked out kind of the metrics of how much is commercially viable versus skipping, incinerating, logistics, and so on. that's working for us. I think the next level is that the value of that data, right? How valuable is that data to you? And what are the data points that are valuable? There's no point just doing data for data's sake, and the way we build our ESG has come really from the corporate clients asking for particular metrics. Like, for example, carbon. We never did carbon early days. Because I was a scrappy startup and it would have cost me $10,000 just to get a consultant to look at, the types of things. And we've done 7.7 million kilos diverted from landfill, so that's a lot of hours.
Wait, say that again. How much?
7.7 million kilos. I don't know it in pounds. We'll have to change it. But that's just from a handful of corporates, really, So you can imagine like that impact on a scale if everybody used Globechain or the market used Globechain. But there's some, we can know values of products, we know who took it, we can track it, we can have blockchain, we can do so many things with it. And I think when the VC market, the analysts, the companies decide on what ESGs are the most important to them, that's where it gets interesting, right? Because an oil rig, for example, they know what the ESGs they need, right, for the market to take them seriously. It'll be probably about a lot of it to do with pollution, water, oceans, carbon, obviously. Whereas like a management consultancy, maybe like a PwC, their ESG is going to be different. It's not going to be about the oceans, right? It might be about the building standard or the more kind of like the ethics or the diversity in the company or so on. So I think there's a lot of work to be done there. But, I've seen definitely this year more ESG departments being created. and more titles with the word ESG, impact, community engagement. And really they're analysts, these people. They're strategy and analysts, right? Because they're the ones in charge of going, okay, what's important for ESG? What's important for the analysts or the bankers or the shareholders? And then work backwards and go, okay, well, where can we improve things in organizations, so it's definitely sped up.
And in this kind of environment that you're in right now, like how do you, what has stood out in terms of from the group that you've worked with, what has stood out in terms of potential? Like what are they asking you to move more for them, or that can you calculate something, or can you, what are those?
So carbon now it's been really good. So carbon for us, it's easy. What we say to them is, you have your own carbon calculations, especially in construction, right? They're pretty much, they've done the work, spent the money on it because it's expensive. Give us how you calculate it. We'll obviously create it through algorithm, through code, and we'll incorporate that in our data because we already know the kilos, we know the material compositions, we know most things. So if we're calculating the carbon the way you're calculating the carbon for your reporting and your finance department, it's all aligned, right? Because I could easily just put a code up and go, this is how much carbon and this is how many trees you saved. But actually, do you really want to know what trees you saved? It means nothing. It means nothing for an analyst. It doesn't actually mean anything for your shareholders. Okay, you're planting trees, great. But actually, you're calculating proper carbon, CO2 and everything, and you need accurate data for that. So for me, I'd rather give you the data you're looking for based on what you've invested your time in,
Right. They'll give you their recipe of what they would like to be able to say about the materials that they want to move. You put that into the system. Then they list their materials in your system. Other nonprofits like, great, I can get these, whatever it is, tables, batteries, whatever. And then the reporting that goes back to the client here's the actual, third party verified, this stuff was moved. And here it is addressed to the metrics that matter to you, Mr. Client.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. It's social, economic, and environmental impact are the main things. And we break down like locations. And obviously, if you're loaning or leasing or reusing internally. Right.
Because if you can give it to somebody closer to the location, that gives a benefit versus shipping it across to another country. Okay.
Yeah. So and we're just incorporating an API logistics in the system, and actually we're just about to do it for the US as well. So we'll be able to start offering couriers on the system, and we'll be able to track the courier. So that's the last part of that supply chain, if you like, end to end, right? That we know the product's listed, we know who's taking it, we know who's booked some courier, we know the carbon from the courier, and then we know where it ends up, and it's all collated. And the best thing about it is in the future, you're going to have electric vehicles, you're going to have reverse logistics, you're going to have empty freight cargo. And so we can get really clever with going, you know what, you want this going from A to B. Guess what? We know we've got a courier coming along and it's empty. Do this, I mean, don't get me wrong, some couriers have got that optimized, right? Because it's full loads, but there's a lot of like half load trucks.
Sure.
And
in the future, there might be a carrier with this all electric fleet. You might have to pay more, but then you're getting the report back that then goes to the bottom line because of the particular regulations your company's operating. And then that might justify paying more to take it on an electric fleet that's newer, raw, right?
Absolutely. But interestingly, you're saying pay it more, but it's going to be the norm going forward,
well,
right?
So yes.
6 years ago, that's just being a bit
you might pay more.
6 years ago, we were expensive, right? And no one had a budget for us, right? Because there's no budget department. Like, where do we fit? Do we fit into waste, facilities, procurement? Sustainability didn't even have a budget. Now, interestingly, budgets are being created for this market. So we do fit in now, right? I'd say the challenge we have at the moment is fitting into supplier portals for procurement and government procurement. That is an absolute nightmare. Like, for example, we could never go and do a government procurement at the moment in the US because we're not 50% owned by the US, a US person, right? But also, if we were there, I mean, the amount of documentation in the UK just to get on a government tender portal, 78 pages, and nothing is relevant to me. It's like, do you have liability to come into this location? What are your workers doing? Are they health and safety? I'm like, non-applicable, 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 non-applicable. So if the system's automated to allow you to become a supplier initially for tendering, we're just going to get rejected because I can't answer probably like 80% of the questions
because they haven't even thought about the types of companies like you guys that could fit
I've got no hope that's going to happen in the next few years, to be honest.
I don't know if you've noticed our government in the US we're a little
but I can't really talk because our government's the same.
Oh, yours too, huh? Oh man. Well, and again, it's unfortunate that we talk about it like this, but it's like the case is like
the most important jobs in the world, and nobody wants them.
But at the end of the day, that isn't a driver to the business that you're in, right? Or the customers that you have, right? So
no, it's an enhancement, if you like. If they change policy, it just makes enterprise and everybody's life easier because it doesn't overcomplicate the process of reuse, which is mind-boggling because, the basics of anything is reuse it rather than breaking it down chemically and creating something super duper out of it, like just reuse it,
Right. I wonder
reuse it while you figure it out.
But I think that I wonder if that, I mean, it's just I can't help but think that you're in an awesome spot because you are self-sustaining right now. So you don't actually need cash to get the idea up and running, but you're in the right spot for potential partnerships. I mean, these clients that you have become like partners, right? They're telling you like, well, this is how we've calculated what we need. That across a few different customers then gives you a bigger sense of what their compelling, their pressures, what they're looking for. So that makes your IP smarter. I mean, this is like you're developing a cottage industry just by sitting here. So to me, the question is like, I mean, forget VCs, like who's got some cash, who's got a long-term outlook that understands that the world is going to change. It's going to happen, and it's going to happen in fits and starts. And then it's going to be a massive rush because people will be playing catch up for the next 2 decades, right?
They've got like 9 years for their 2030 targets.
They're going to be desperate to find people like you that, from a customer acquisition perspective, like right now, if you're somebody, forget the investors, but if you're a customer that has a new ESG office and you need to do something, and why would you go experimenting on your own? Why not talk to May? Why not go to Globechain and get started with her, where you can actually impact the way she's collecting this data for you guys, right? And oh, by the way, she's got all these charities and nonprofits and people that would gladly take this stuff off your hands, right? Check mark, check mark. So, I mean, really, what do you need at this point? You don't need investors. You just want the customers.
Honestly, it's exactly what you said. It's like a customer that's got a big vision, that understands you've got to change and innovate, and a patient customer, right? Like, we're working with some really big global enterprises, and what's really interesting is like they love what we do and they can use it as it is, and we're going, okay, well, this is a challenge. We could do this with you and help you, because a lot of them obviously have consumers, right? And we're not direct consumer, but there are ways you can use us to engage your consumer for your ESG, and use us as a system, because we're technology, we're a software, right? Even though we're a marketplace, we're still SaaS, and we're scalable and defensible, and we're strong in architecture. So there's a lot of benefit by just using us and integrating into us, and we can do it faster and quicker. Historically, B2B selling has always been like 6-9 months, some take years, obviously, to get deals. But as you said, people need to be quicker now. And I think the mindset's changed as well in a positive way at COVID, because everyone had to change and do things way out their comfort zone, right? Like, we all worked from home, and as big corporates, that's a nightmare from a logistics and HR perspective, but everyone did it, okay, there's pros and cons, but like, it's the same thing. It's like, now we've become low risk. So it's like, now you can go to your innovation departments and go, you see the risk we had last year where
HR,
we lost all our revenue.
Stop.
We haven't got a risk now, because we're not making any revenue anyway. So we're not going to lose revenue by trying something new. So you're seeing this kind of weird shift of like, suddenly now it's a no-brainer, and actually people are less fearful to try something new, and they realize they have to, right? It's do or die, really.
Yeah, I think if I was a salesperson working for you, I would probably find opportunities to explain, have you calculated your reputational risk of not engaging in never mind our service, just in general, not doing this ESG. Like, if it's just one person in the ESG department, it's like, what can we do to help you grow your department? Because you're going to need a lot of extra help, right? And you're kind of like one of these other pieces, just bringing it's coming. The wave is coming. I don't know how to explain it anymore to anybody. I haven't, fortunately for me, I haven't had conversations offline where I haven't talked to anybody that doesn't say climate change is an issue, right? That's all gone.
Especially the weather we're having at the moment, the fires, the floods, the God knows what else. I mean, like, the UK, every 40 minutes, we've got rain and torrential rain and sun, like every 40 minutes.
Yeah,
like
it's crazy. I mean, we've had, anyway, I mean, I don't have to explain it. It's there. The pressure's on. Is this really even that innovative? We're just simply saying, don't throw it in the trash, just find somebody who can take it, and you're going to get rewarded for that, for just doing that process to the bottom line over time.
The impact is massive. That simple donation of reuse, we have this strap line, like a new life from wanted stuff, right? It's kind of a play on the words. The new life, if I had a couple of tables as a company or as an individual, I'm like, it's a table, I'm disposing of it. But I give it to somebody that, say, is setting up their own business, or it's a family that feeds their kids around the table because they didn't have enough money to buy their furniture. The impact goes beyond it's just a table, right? It creates a new life for somebody as well, without getting too dramatic. But, like some of those things, like that medical equipment, that rebuild hospitals in rural places in Africa, like Ghana and Sierra Leone and Kenya, and for a community of like 20,000 people to use, right? They couldn't afford that equipment for a start. And actually, when asked, like, why do you ship things from the UK there? They can't redistribute it. They can't find distribution. So there's, gone is the concept of like, we're dumping in Africa or Latin America or wherever, China is the case it used to be. It's not about that. It's about the impact of those assets and the domino effect that creates, right? Because they're taking assets from a company that would have disposed of, say that's worth $20,000, that could equate to a part-time salaried person for that nonprofit, that cafe, that school. We have schools take computers, COVID, how many schools do you know were underfunded and didn't have computers for kids at home, underprivileged children, and then you've got companies disposing of monitors and laptops because they're just going through an audit.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that not sorry to interrupt, but it's just like the capital is just so relative to the situation that somebody finds themselves in. And so a huge company, a $20,000 table door fixture, whatever it is that they're just, it's almost like for them, it's just, it takes more, it costs them more to even think about it. Right.
Yeah.
But you put that in the right spot and that just lifts, like, especially like a thing. You don't have to keep buying it anymore. It's been bought. It's there. It's like you just infused it with capital that lifts their cash flow to use for other services. Right. So it's the disparity, the difference when you go to certain parts of the world, it's just enormous. But we have to be cognizant that you can't just send a shipping container full of t-shirts and just dump it in someplace. Like you really have to think that through. And there's a whole horde of nonprofits, organizations. There's a whole supply chain associated with getting that right.
Yeah,
you don't have to figure that out, corporate America. You just have to just get with May. Give that to they'll find what they need. The people that are members of yours will find what they need from you, and you get to get this shiny report that we've actually done something with our stuff.
Honestly, right? It was. I remember last year or the year before we did. We were helping a bank. We're quietly in Houston and we're in Texas, Houston, and I think Atlanta as well. And the company listed some furniture from a warehouse that they didn't want. So they were having a big kind of audit. And people were taking it, individuals and businesses, like a real mix. And when we were looking at the feedback, because we asked them for feedback and stories, because you get some great stories sometimes of what they did with the items. And everybody was mentioning this thing, Katrina. And I'm like, oh, because of Katrina did this and we haven't got this 2 years down the line. I'm like, and it didn't click. I was like, who is Katrina? It was Hurricane Katrina, right? And I'm like, wow, 2 years after the hurricane, there were people still struggling. And it just brought, like, we talk about like things going to Africa or Latin America, whatever. There are people really deprived that struggle in the US themselves. And that Absolutely. Just brought another dimension to the system and like what those little bits of furniture did for the people locally in that area, and probably gave brownie points to that bank that gave it because it's local, right? It's community engagement in the area for that bank. So it aligns very well. And what does the bank want? The bank wants consumers, and the bank wants people in the area to trust them. And it was just a really beautiful, like effortless case study of the bank wanting to do good naturally. And actually the benefit of it was due to something that happened 2 years previously by nature. So it was interesting to see how grateful people were on the site.
Yeah, you it's just so easy to underestimate the potential impact with a lot of this stuff, right? I mean, you give to charity, you try to help your neighbors, your community, that it makes a difference, but getting it to scale, this is the level that we have to get to, and you're a key component to this. I mean, I look at the potential for communications and marketing of some of these companies you work with. It's like attaching the fact that you have this product that you sell and that you have this ESG program, and maybe 40% are returns, and you can thank your customers for those returns that you're not going to incinerate because you're sending it to this community that would never have had a chance to actually have that product or whatever it is. And there's a process there that everybody sort of the benefits without having to get into the circular economy component just yet. Like it's just, you're just sort of redistributing
very simple stories. Very simple storytelling. We get photos, we get great videos. My favorite one recently is fire doors from a strip out. 70 fire doors went to a school in Ghana. And the case study was, we need these doors for the school, because they haven't got doors on the schools, to protect the pupil from the local wildlife. And I just thought, what a great story. I'm like, what is the local wildlife in Ghana? Do you know? But it was like the craziness. So you don't think of these things, you know, like they couldn't afford doors, you know, or they'd built a school without doors, probably budgets, right? And the heat and other things, but then they needed them. And just for me, that was quite warming, you know?
Here we don't even think of fire doors. It's just like a heavy door in my apartment. Like I gotta okay, it's just
exactly.
Yeah, that material would have gone into a landfill.
Or your sofa and your cabinet from like, or even, you know, a lot of hotels when they give their bedroom furniture away, you know, it goes to homeless charities to rehome people or young offenders that have left prison, and you know, they don't have anything. They don't even have a jacket, clothing. So, you know, they need everything right down to a knife and fork. So those basic things that restaurants give away, the cutlery,
a chair, a bed, a table, to be able to sit and think and write about what you're going to do next, and, you know, plan your day. I mean, all the things we just take for granted, you know, you and I, are the things that are like, for other people, really, like, it's the thing that keeps them from progressing and moving forward with their lives, right? I mean, I don't know. You're in the right spot for all the good that you're doing. I just want to make sure that, May, you get also your due and get some customers and get some, you know, real visionary investors that be willing to expand your operations. And by the way, don't take those first offers from anybody. Okay. You've earned it. You've been in the trenches here for 6-7 years.
I will be questioning their processes.
Yeah, they got to come to you. You don't.
Yeah, they can come.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're just in the right spot for that to happen. I honestly can't think of any. I mean, I'm sure there are others out there. You don't have to name competitors. They're probably not even competitors. You're all trying to collaborate through what you're figuring out, the ESG scenarios and how you actually get this data in there. But what would you, if you would have an ask out there for anybody that's listening, where could you get some help? Where would you be willing to absorb some assistance? Like, what do you need?
Yeah, for sure. The US, where we're in at the moment for the external reuse, where the network is, we're in New York and, as I mentioned, Texas, right? And we have little bubbles of network growing around the US, but, you know, we're small. There's a lot of noise in the US with startups doing ESG data and so on. So really it's about raising awareness, you know, and going, look, we're here. It's not like we're launching. We have a system. It's ready to use and to solve a problem that is quite hot in the market at the moment. So anybody that really wants to partner up, get us out there, talk to lots of nonprofits. You know, nonprofits are actually more difficult to find than consumers, right? You can't just put an advertisement up on in some transport and get your target market, you know, and there's not many places where they read or whatever, and, you know, they struggle. So it's about getting our name out there, and really it's trust, isn't it? It's referral and trust.
And so getting nonprofits in the New York area, getting nonprofits in, you know, what part of Texas? I mean, Texas is gigantic, right?
Yeah, I know. For us, I mean, obviously Houston we do as well, and Austin you can do, but the main cities. But generally, if what we're doing is we're looking at where the nonprofits are registering, and we'll open up that region when we have enough nonprofits. And you don't need as many as consumers, right? This is not like we need 3 million users to take quite a large amount of items.
Do you have anything in Washington, D.C.? Are you still?
No, that's next on the list. So like East Coast, and then obviously West Coast, you know, the classic kind of strategy really that startups go for. But for sure, we're like Chicago, Boston, kind of Florida, a bit more Miami, to be honest.
And the service is free for the nonprofits to check in, and just you want them just monitoring, get on the list, get on as a profile.
Get on. Yeah, absolutely. Tell us where you're from. Like we know where you're from, and then we monitor it, and then we build it up, and then we start bringing on the clients in those areas. Right? It's chicken and egg, supply and demand. So
I got to have enough nonprofits monitoring the listings so that I can then bring in Mr. Klein, let's open up this region area that you said you had a warehouse and you're trying to get them some things moved.
Absolutely. Yeah. And small businesses as well. We're not just nonprofits. We have quite a lot of small businesses and, they take some really interesting assets, whether they're setting up their office space, their own enterprise, their cafe, it's their garage, they've got a small manufacturing business. Those small businesses are just as powerful and need the money just as much as, charities do as well. They don't get much funding externally. These are usually like sole traders and family-owned businesses and things like that. So,
maybe corporations, those benefit corporations that we have in the US might also be a good target for you. So you don't have to be a nonprofit necessarily. No. Just need people that would like to absorb some things, would like to get some things, just to be monitoring in your system, be into the system.
Absolutely. Yeah. The nonprofit started because when we started doing fixtures and fittings for the stores, the most obvious place they would go would be like thrift stores, right? Mm-hmm. And shops. So that's how the system started building up. But, quite a lot of our network is classed as the arts industry, right? But that's a big sector that covers almost everything from designers, fashion designers, architects. All these people can take materials for free. All we ask you to do is obviously fill in the case study so we understand what you're doing with it for storytelling, and also pay for the courier, the logistics. So you get it for free, but you've got to book in.
You got to get it. You got to get it. Exactly. Right. Okay. And then for the corporations, it's like, give us the data how you're calculating, what you're looking for. And we can.
For the corporates, you can actually don't even need that. Like we have that, right? Up to a point. If you want carbon, absolutely give us your carbon calculation. Okay. Or if you want something we don't do, absolutely give us it. But we tend to have quite a lot of what they want now anyway. It's that odd thing. What we do is we look at it and go, okay, how many corporates are asking for this? Okay, we'll build it. Is it useful for everybody? But most things we've covered now, based on corporates telling us, May, this is a nightmare, or actually, can you integrate it with our EPOS system? Or we've got this inventory system, can you book it in? And I'm like, absolutely. So we look at technology and then we create the API for it. So those things are simpler than you think.
And then the potential there is for the aggregators of tech. I don't know, the Salesforces, the Palantirs, these companies that are becoming massive scales. That partnering opportunities, I would presume, that if they could get you into their corporate apps world and then promote that into like, here's a service that you can then offload a bunch of your stuff from the inventory and it's all already pre-enabled, then now the conversation is simply like, how much stuff do you want and what do we need to configure just a bit on the reporting that you want?
Absolutely.
And then your job is to then find more people to give this stuff to, right?
Yeah, because it's all automated. You don't even need to take a photo and list it, right? It's all there. You just press a button, move to Globechain. We have
this type of table. How many do you want?
Yeah, it's literally. And it's like, oh, guess what? Courier's booked in. Okay, it's coming on this day. Reminders, data. And it just, it's like a new supply. It's like a new logistics company.
Yeah.
I class us as a tech company, but we're really disrupting the waste market and supply chain, right? We're digitalizing a section of the supply chain.
Yeah. And that okay, when I listen to talks about AI and what they're able to do today with artificial intelligence, the hardest part is actually getting the data. It's never been about like, how do we model this so that the system self-corrects and all. It's just like actually getting the data, and we didn't have enough data back in the days in like this sort of malleable between system disparate databases. We don't have that. So when the spot that you're in, that's the value here, is really you're in this little spot where you're just sort of how would you describe it? You're matchmaking, okay?
Yeah.
But then this tiny bit of data that you can't get from anywhere else in the world because you have it between those conversations and between what's being asked. That's the value for an investor, right? That's smart. That would know that May is going to be a rich woman one day here easily in the next few years, because you just got to just stay where you are. Yeah. Man, May, thank you for giving us a bit of your time. I know you're super busy and it's probably late over there on the other side of our lake. Thank you so much. How do you, like, obviously, Globechain, it's just globechain.com, right?
Globechain.com, GLOBECHAIN, like global and supply chain. So just go on, you can have a look, register, very simple, get in touch with us. Please do. If there's anything, if this conversation's motivated me to do this, thank you for listening on the show. I really appreciate it. Thank you to the few of you that actually click and listen to the videos on YouTube. It's just, I don't know what I'm doing on YouTube. It doesn't matter. I'm just putting it out there. I really appreciate you guys. Of course, all of you that have been listening over the years. Thank you so much. May, let's be sure that we get together again in 6 months or between 6 months and a year. I want to do this again. Let's talk again. I want to see how you're progressing and if there's any other ways we can help. So thank you so much. Love to. Thank you for having me.
For more episodes of Through the Noise, go to throughthenoise.us.